There's a moment that happens in relationships that almost nobody talks about. You're sitting next to someone you love, maybe on the couch, maybe in the car after a small argument that somehow got way too quiet. You ask something simple, like, "Are we okay?" And they don't explode, but they don't comfort you either. They just get flatter, shorter, colder. Their eyes drift. Their body stays there, but somehow they're gone. And now you're sitting inches away from them, feeling completely alone. Your mind starts racing. Why do they shut down like this? Did I ask for too much? Why does it feel like the closer I get, the further away they become? Do they even care? Am I the problem? Here's the truth most people miss. Avoidant attachment doesn't sound like "I don't love you." It sounds like distance, deflection, independence, silence. It sounds like someone whose nervous system learned that needing people is dangerous. So no, you're not failing at love, and this is not automatically a sign you chose the wrong person. A lot of people who care deeply still go emotionally missing when closeness starts to feel too real. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand what avoidant attachment is really saying beneath the surface, why it happens, and how to stop misreading distance as the absence of love. Let's get into it. Most couples believe relationship problems come from a lack of love, but the real truth is that a lot of relationship problems come from a lack of emotional safety. That changes everything. Because when you understand avoidant attachment, you stop seeing the behavior as random. You stop taking every pause, every shutdown, every "I'm fine" at face value. You start seeing the deeper pattern underneath it. Here's the thing. Your partner's nervous system is reading closeness before their mind can explain it. So what looks like stonewalling is often someone getting overwhelmed too fast. What looks like indifference is often someone trying not to drown in feelings they don't know how to hold. What looks like not caring can actually be a very old strategy for staying regulated. Most couples think the answer is more talking, more explaining, more pushing for clarity. But here's what nobody explains. If someone has avoidant attachment, trying harder without changing the emotional tone can make them withdraw even more. Not because they're cruel, not because they're broken, not because they want to punish you, but because closeness without safety can feel like pressure. And pressure makes old protection patterns come online fast. That's why the anxious avoidance cycle is so brutal. One person reaches because they want connection. The other pulls back because they want safety. And beneath the surface, both people are often longing for the exact same thing: to feel loved without feeling swallowed. So if you've ever looked at an avoidant person and thought, "Why are they acting like this when all I'm doing is loving them?" This is going to make that make sense. Because avoidant attachment has a language. It just usually isn't spoken in direct words first. It's spoken in timing, in distance, in tone, in what gets deflected, and in what never gets named. Once you learn that language, you stop reacting to the surface and start hearing what's real. One of the biggest things to understand is that when an avoidant person says, "I need space," it often doesn't mean, "I don't care about you." It often means, "I don't feel safe staying open right now." Most couples hear "I need space" and immediately translate it as rejection. That's the default pattern. One person asks for distance, the other person hears abandonment. And suddenly, both people are in defense mode before the real conversation has even started. But the deeper truth is that avoidant attachment often experiences emotional intensity like a smoke detector experiences steam. It doesn't always know the difference between closeness and danger. So when feelings get strong, Their nervous system says, back up, regulate, get out of range. Inside them, the unspoken thought is often, if I stay in this conversation right now, I'm going to lose myself. So the disconnecting version sounds like, I need space. Of course you do. You always leave when things get real. But the connecting version sounds like, I need 20 minutes. I'm getting overwhelmed, and I want to come back calmer. Okay, I don't love the distance, but I can work with honesty. That is a completely different moment. Because when space stops being a disappearance and starts being a defined pause, the walls between you start to come down without either of you having to say a word. Another part of the language of avoidant attachment is, I'm fine. And most of the time, that doesn't mean they're actually fine. It usually means they don't have language for what's happening inside them yet. Most couples assume emotional unavailability is always a lack of depth. Like if someone can't name what they feel, they must not feel much at all. But that's not always true. A lot of avoidantly attached people were never taught that emotions were safe to stay with. So instead of learning to recognize sadness, fear, shame, tenderness, disappointment, and longing as separate experiences, they learned to compress everything into one flat response. I'm fine. That's not emotional clarity. That's emotional survival. Because if vulnerability used to be ignored, dismissed, or used against you, of course your system learned to hide it fast. The message inside is often, don't say too much, don't need too much, don't let this get exposed. So the disconnecting version sounds like, what are you feeling right now? Nothing. I said I'm fine. But the connecting version sounds like, what are you feeling right now? I honestly don't fully know yet. I just know I feel tight, irritated, and kind of shut down. That one sentence changes everything. Because this isn't a communication hack. This is just what becoming more emotionally available looks like. It's someone telling the truth before they fully understand it. And that's the shift that turns a relationship that feels like a negotiation into one that feels like a refuge. Silence is another part of this language, and most people misread it. Most couples think silence means someone has checked out. They assume if a person cared, they would say more, reassure more, explain more. But avoidant attachment often goes quiet for the opposite reason. Not because nothing is happening, but because too much is happening. Their body gets flooded, their thoughts get scrambled, and silence becomes the only protection they know. It's like scar tissue, built slowly over years of moments where being open did not feel safe. So now when conflict arrives, the system goes offline to survive it. Somewhere beneath the surface, their brain is quietly saying, if I keep talking, this is going to get worse. So the disconnecting version sounds like, say something. I don't know. You never know. Whatever. But the connecting version sounds like, I can feel you going quiet. Yeah, I'm not trying to ignore you. I'm shutting down a little. Okay. Stay with me in one sentence. I don't know how to do this without feeling trapped. Now you're finally in the real conversation. Not louder conversations, not more analyzing, not forcing a breakthrough at midnight, but two people becoming honest about what's actually happening in real time. And when you do that, your partner stops feeling like a problem to manage and starts feeling like a person to come home to. Hyper-independence is another huge part of avoidant attachment, and at first, most couples mistake it for strength. It can look attractive, grounded, self-contained, low drama. They don't seem needy, they seem solid. But here's what nobody explains. Avoidant attachment can turn independence into armor. Not healthy self-trust, not grounded autonomy, armor. A way of saying, if I never need too much from you, you can't disappoint me too deeply. That's why they may insist on handling everything alone, struggle to ask for help, or pull away when they're hurting most. Because dependence feels risky. The hidden thought is often, the minute I rely on you, you have the power to hurt me. So the disconnecting version sounds like, you should have told me you were struggling. I can handle it. You don't have to do everything alone. Yes, I do. But the connecting version sounds like, you should have told me you were struggling. I know. A part of me still feels safer dealing with things by myself. You don't have to prove anything to me. I'm trying to believe that. Bro, that is real. Because when someone lowers the armor just enough to be seen in their need, even for a second, something in the relationship softens. That's when the distance stops feeling permanent and starts feeling repairable. A lot of avoidant people also speak in logic when the real story is emotional. This is one of the most confusing parts if you don't know what you're looking at. Most couples think the argument is about the argument. The dishes, the text, the tone, the canceled plan. So they stay at the surface and keep trying to solve the content. But avoidant attachment often speaks in logic to avoid the vulnerability underneath. Facts feel safer than feelings. Analysis feels safer than admission. So instead of saying, I felt criticized and small when you said that, they might say, you're overreacting, or this is inefficient, or there's no point talking about this right now. It sounds cold, but beneath the surface, the real experience is often shame, and shame hates being seen. Inside, what may actually be moving through them is, if I admit this hurt, I'll feel weak, and if I feel weak, I lose control. So the disconnecting version sounds like, it upset me when you brushed me off. I didn't brush you off. You're making this bigger than it is. But the connecting version sounds like, it upset me when you brushed me off. I want to explain my side, but honestly, the first thing I felt was accused. That lands differently. Because now the logic is no longer hiding the heart. Now the mind is working with the emotions instead of against them, and that's what creates presence instead of defensiveness. And here's a painful truth that confuses so many people. Pulling away after closeness doesn't always mean the closeness was fake. Most couples assume that if someone gets warm, open, affectionate, and then suddenly withdrawn, the warm part must not have been real. They think, see, I knew it. None of that meant anything. But that's not always what's happening. For avoidant attachment, intimacy itself can be the trigger. Not just conflict. Closeness. Good closeness. A beautiful weekend. A deep conversation. A moment of being truly seen. Because once connection gets real, the stakes get real. And the nervous system starts whispering, this matters too much now. Back away before this can own you. So the retreat after closeness is not always proof the connection was fake. Sometimes it's proof the connection was powerful enough to scare them. The disconnecting version sounds like, we had such a good night. Why are you acting weird now? I'm not acting weird. You always do this after we get close. Maybe we moved too fast. But the connecting version sounds like, we had such a good night. Why are you feeling far away today? I think closeness sometimes makes me want to retreat. Not because it was bad, because it meant something. That sentence can explain years. Because when you understand that drift can happen after intimacy, you stop personalizing every withdrawal as proof you imagined the connection. And that changes everything. So what actually helps? Small, honest, consistent repair. Most couples think healing avoidant attachment requires one massive emotional breakthrough, one perfect conversation, one night where everything gets said and suddenly the pattern disappears. That's not how this works. Avoidant attachment heals in smaller moments than most people expect. In consistent, non-invasive, emotionally clean moments of repair. Not chasing, not fixing, not interrogating, but showing up in a way that says, you can have space without losing connection. You can tell the truth here without being swallowed. You can be imperfect here and still be loved. That's what slowly teaches the nervous system a new language. Somewhere inside, what begins to emerge is, maybe closeness doesn't have to cost me myself. So the disconnecting version sounds like, we need to talk about everything, right now. No more avoiding. I can't do this. See, you never change. But the connecting version sounds like, I'm not asking for a perfect conversation. Then what are you asking for? Just honesty. One real sentence. Then we can build from there. Okay. The truth is, I pull away when I feel pressured, even when I know you're trying to love me. That's it. That's the doorway. Because this isn't a trick for avoiding conflict. This is what it looks like when someone has learned to love without disappearing from themselves. And that's the shift that turns a relationship from a battlefield of old patterns into a place where both of you can finally exhale. So if you've been trying to understand the language of avoidant attachment, here's what I want you to remember. It is not spoken only in words. It is spoken in distance, in deflection, in delayed responses, in needing space, in staying logical, in going quiet, in acting self-sufficient, in loving you and still feeling terrified by how much that love asks them to soften. Once you understand that, you stop reading every withdrawn moment as a verdict on your worth. You start listening deeper. This isn't about becoming someone who tolerates emotional absence forever, and it's not about excusing hurtful behavior. It's about becoming the kind of person who can tell the difference between malice and protection.